Welcome back to Buried Tales, where the darkness beneath familiar stories comes to light. Santa's workshop, cheerful elves crafting toys with endless smiles, the very picture of Christmas magic. Or so the story goes. The reality is far more disturbing. What if those jolly helpers were never meant to be helpers at all? What if they were something far more sinister, creatures of shadow and malice that haunted the nightmares of entire civilizations before they became Disney's cute toymakers? Elves were the stuff of terror. Ancient Norse folklore painted them as vengeful spirits who stole children, cursed livestock, and drove men to madness. Medieval Europe knew them as demons who crept into homes at night, leaving sickness and death in their wake. These weren't workshop assistants, they were harbingers of doom. So how did humanity's most feared supernatural predators become Christmas helpers? The answer lies in a centuries-long campaign to sanitize our darkest myths, burying the truth beneath layers of commercial Christmas cheer. But tonight, we're digging deeper. We're uncovering the blood-soaked origins of these creatures, tracing their evolution from ancient nightmare to modern lie, because some truths are too disturbing to leave buried forever. To understand how elves became Santa's cheerful workshop assistants, we need to venture into the frost-bitten forests of ancient Scandinavia. Here, beneath the endless winter nights, the Norse people whispered stories of the Alfar, beings so far removed from today's cute Christmas helpers that you might not recognize them at all. These weren't the jolly, pointed-eared toy makers we know today. The original elves were creatures of immense power and terrifying mystery. Norse mythology split them into two chilling categories, the light elves and the dark elves, and neither were particularly interested in making toys. The light elves, or Ljósalfar, were radiant beings who inhabited Alfheimr, one of the 9 realms in Norse cosmology. This wasn't some cozy workshop. It was a realm of blinding light and otherworldly beauty, ruled by Freya, goddess of fertility and war. These light elves possessed godlike powers and were associated with creativity and healing. Artists would desperately pray to them for inspiration, believing that without an elf's touch, their work would be worthless. But it was their dark counterparts that truly haunted the Norse imagination. The Dukkalfar, or dark elves, lurked in the deepest underground caverns, dwelling in places where sunlight never dared to reach. These shadow dwellers were malevolent forces of nature, known to inflict sickness, misfortune, and death on anyone who crossed them. To anger a dark elf wasn't just bad luck, it was a death sentence. But here's where it gets really creepy. These weren't distant fairy tale creatures. In Norse belief, elves lived among humans, watching, waiting, judging. They demanded respect, and the consequences of forgetting them were swift and merciless. Farmers knew this intimately. They'd leave offerings at special elf stones, rocks believed to house these ancient spirits, milk, bread, ale, whatever might appease them, because when the elves were pleased, your crops flourished, your livestock thrived, your family stayed healthy. But cross them, ignore them, the punishment was swift and brutal. Dark elves didn't just withdraw their blessings, they actively destroyed lives. Entire households would fall under mysterious illnesses. Crops would wither overnight. Livestock would die without explanation. These weren't random tragedies. They were calculated revenge from beings who remembered every slight, every forgotten offering. But perhaps the most chilling Norse elf legend was the changeling. Dark elves craved human children, whether for their innocence or as replacements for their own diseased offspring. Nobody knew they would steal babies from their cribs, leaving behind their own twisted offspring as substitutes. These changelings were nightmarish, sickly, deformed, unnaturally demanding. They brought nothing but misery to families who had no idea their real child was gone forever. The changeling myth spread like wildfire across Europe, but in Scandinavian traditions, it carried a particularly sinister edge. Parents became obsessed with protection rituals, placing iron near cribs, never leaving children unattended after dark, because they knew the elves were always watching, always waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But here's where the story takes a disturbing turn. Elves weren't just seasonal visitors, they were harbingers of the most dangerous time of year. During the winter solstice, When darkness consumed the longest night, the Norse believed reality itself grew thin. The barriers between our world and theirs crumbled like ancient ice. This wasn't a time for celebration alone. It was a time of terror, when supernatural beings roamed freely through a world suddenly stripped of its protective boundaries. Elves moved through the shadows with purposes we could barely comprehend, their true intentions hidden behind faces that could shift from beautiful to horrifying. In an instant, the Norse knew better than to ignore them. They left offerings, not out of kindness, but out of desperate hope. Food, drink, anything that might appease these otherworldly entities and prevent them from turning their attention toward human affairs. Because when elves grew angry, entire communities could face curses that lasted generations. As Norse warriors and traders spread across Europe, they carried these chilling tales with them. The stories evolved, adapted, merged with local fears and superstitions. But no matter how they changed, whether they became household spirits, woodland fairies, or basement goblins, the ancient dread remained. Even today, when we tell stories of elves, we're channeling fears that are over 1,000 years old, whispers of a time when the supernatural was as real as the winter wind. As Christianity moved across Scandinavia and Europe between the 9th and 12th centuries, something sinister happened to the elves. These once revered beings, who had been worshipped as mystical guardians of nature, suddenly found themselves cast as enemies of the new faith. The transformation was deliberate and brutal. Christian missionaries couldn't simply erase centuries of deeply rooted beliefs, so they did something far more insidious. They twisted them. Elves, once seen as protectors and guides, were systematically rebranded as agents of darkness, servants of the devil himself. Stories began spreading like wildfire through villages and towns. Elves were no longer the wise, ethereal beings of Old Norse mythology. They became tempters, whispering evil into the ears of good Christians. They were blamed for everything that went wrong: crops failing, children falling ill, livestock dying mysterious deaths. The most chilling development was the concept of elf shot. When someone or something fell inexplicably sick, people whispered that invisible elven arrows had struck them down. Under Christian influence, this ancient explanation for unexplained illness became something terrifying, a form of demonic assault on the faithful. What had once been the dark elves of Norse mythology, mysterious but not necessarily evil, transformed into something much more malevolent. They became the things that haunted your sleep, the voices that drove you mad, the shadows that possessed your soul. The old gods weren't just forgotten, they were demonized, turned into the very monsters Christianity claimed to protect against. Christianity also swept across the British Isles like a slow-moving tide. During this time, something sinister began to happen to the old gods and spirits. The powerful Norse and Germanic elves, beings once feared and revered, started to dissolve into something smaller, weaker, more palatable. Their ancient power was being deliberately erased. This wasn't just cultural evolution, it was systematic erasure. The mighty elves who once commanded respect merged with Celtic fairy lore, but in this blending, they lost their teeth. What had once been towering, otherworldly beings, capable of blessing or cursing entire bloodlines, were gradually shrunk down into harmless, almost childlike creatures. They went from commanding the elements to playing tricks in someone's kitchen. Geoffrey Chaucer captured this transformation perfectly in The Wife of Bath's Tale, written in the late 1300s. He described a world where fairies and elves had once roamed freely, a time when magic was real and present in everyday life. But then came the Christian clergy, and suddenly these powerful beings were nowhere to be found. They'd been pushed out, relegated to whispered stories and children's tales. What Chaucer was really documenting was the death of an entire belief system. The elves hadn't simply evolved, they'd been neutered, transformed from beings of genuine power into harmless folklore. The old magic was being systematically replaced, one prayer at a time, one church at a time, until all that remained were diminished echoes of what had once commanded genuine fear and respect. By the time William Shakespeare penned A Midsummer Night's Dream, Something disturbing had happened to the ancient elves. The terrifying beings that once drove mortals to madness were being transformed into something far more palatable, playful tricksters who delighted in harmless mischief. Shakespeare's Puck represents this calculated transformation. No longer the soul-stealing predator of Norse nightmares, Puck became a mischievous sprite who caused confusion for entertainment. The playwright even blurred the lines between elf and fairy, diluting centuries of genuine fear into whimsical fantasy. This wasn't accidental, it was cultural amnesia in action. But here's what's truly unsettling. While literature was sanitizing these creatures for mass consumption, European folklore refused to forget their true nature. By the Middle Ages, elves had evolved into household spirits that walked a razor's edge between helpful and wicked. They became known as brownies, small, magical beings that would perform chores under cover of darkness, but only if properly appeased. The arrangement was simple, yet sinister. Leave offerings of milk, bread, or porridge, and your household would run smoothly, but neglect them, insult them. The consequences were swift and brutal. Brownies would shatter your belongings, sabotage your daily routines, or simply vanish, leaving families to wonder what invisible force had been keeping their lives from falling apart. This wasn't the territory of a fairy tale. This was protection money paid to unseen entities that held your domestic peace hostage. Over centuries, brownies wove themselves into the fabric of folklore, merging with elves in ways that would forever change how we imagine magical helpers. But they weren't alone in this dark corner of European belief. In the frozen landscapes of Scandinavia, the Vettir haunted farmsteads with the same unsettling devotion. These gnome-like guardians watched over animals and crops with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Honor them properly. Leave that bowl of porridge by the hearth, and they'd protect your family with fierce loyalty. But forget their offering even once, and you'd discover just how vindictive these tiny protectors could be. Pranks would escalate to sabotage, and sabotage could spiral into genuine misfortune that might destroy everything you'd worked to build. By the late 1700s, these household spirits had burrowed deep into the collective unconscious. People genuinely believed in their presence, these industrious, protective beings who demanded payment for their devotion. The connection between work, loyalty, and rewards wasn't just folklore. It was a survival contract that families honored out of genuine fear. What's chilling is how seamlessly this ancient terror transformed into something we now consider wholesome. These same supernatural entities, with their demands for offerings and their capacity for revenge, would eventually become the jolly, gift-making elves of Christmas tradition. The darkness didn't disappear, it simply learned to smile. One of the most famous depictions of elves as helpful figures comes from a fairy tale told and retold for centuries, The Elves and the Shoemaker. This beloved story, collected by the Brothers Grimm in the early 19th century, offers a glimpse into how elves transitioned from their mysterious, often menacing roots to the cheerful helpers we recognize today. But here's what most people don't realize about this seemingly innocent tale. It's built on a foundation of desperation and supernatural debt that runs much deeper than anyone wants to admit. In the story, a poor shoemaker is down to his last piece of leather, unable to make enough shoes to survive. He's not just struggling, he's staring death in the face, resigned to complete despair. But as he sleeps, something miraculous happens. Or does it? In the morning, he discovers that his leather has been transformed into a pair of exquisite shoes, perfectly crafted and ready to sell. This cycle repeats each night. Like clockwork, the shoemaker leaves out his last scraps of leather, and by morning, they've been turned into beautiful shoes that seem almost too perfect for human hands. Soon, the shoemaker and his wife grow prosperous, thanks to these mysterious helpers they've never seen. But prosperity built on unknown forces always comes with a price, doesn't it? One night, instead of leaving out leather, they make tiny clothes and shoes for the elves. When the elves discover these gifts, they are delighted, but then they never return to the workshop. The shoemaker's mysterious helpers have vanished forever, leaving behind only questions about what really happened during those dark nights. Elves, like other household spirits, were bound by ancient contracts written in silence and superstition. They helped humans, but only in exchange for offerings or respect. When the shoemaker provided clothing for his nocturnal helpers, he wasn't just being kind, he was fulfilling an unspoken agreement that had lasted generations. By giving them garments, he released them from their obligation to serve. The elves were finally free. This haunting theme of freedom through gifts echoes through folklore like a whispered secret. You've seen it before. The freeing of house elves like Dobby in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series wasn't just creative storytelling. It was tapping into something much older, something that had been lurking in our collective memory for centuries. But here's what's truly unsettling. The elves and the shoemaker became the turning point. This single story transformed elves from mysterious, sometimes dangerous, household spirits into symbols of kindness and Christmas magic. We watch as these ancient beings, once feared and respected, become sanitized, commercialized, and eventually enslaved again. In Santa's workshop, the irony is chilling. A story about granting freedom to supernatural beings became the very vehicle that would chain them forever to our holiday fantasies. Sometimes, the most innocent tales hide the darkest transformations. If you're finding yourself drawn into these dark revelations, a simple like tells me you're ready for more buried truths. Your support helps me dig deeper into the stories they never wanted you to know. So thank you for being part of this journey into the shadows. Fast forward to 1823, and something strange happened that would forever change how we see Christmas. On December 23rd, a mysterious poem appeared in the Troy Sentinel, a New York newspaper. No author's name was attached, no explanation given, just these haunting words that would reshape an entire holiday tradition. The poem was called A Visit from St. Nicholas, though you probably know it as The Night Before Christmas. For 14 years, it spread across America like wildfire, reprinted again and again, always anonymous. Finally, in 1837, a man named Clement Clark Moore stepped forward to claim it. But here's where it gets interesting. Some scholars believe he was lying. They point to Major Henry Livingston Jr. as the real author, suggesting Moore stole credit for one of America's most beloved poems. But the true mystery isn't who wrote it, it's what it did to our understanding of Christmas itself. This anonymous poem described St. Nicholas as a right jolly old elf, words that sound almost absurd today, but they were revolutionary. Before this moment, Santa Claus was a somber, religious figure drawn from Dutch and German traditions, a saint, not a magical creature. This poem transformed him into something entirely different, something supernatural. For the first time in popular culture, elves and Christmas became intertwined. The author, whoever they were, had just planted the seeds for an army of workshop elves that wouldn't fully emerge for decades. But the foundation was laid in an anonymous newspaper poem that appeared without warning and changed everything. Now, let's descend into the shadowy corridors of 19th century Victorian England, where something unsettling was happening to our oldest fears. This was an era consumed by the supernatural, a time when the Romantic movement had awakened a hunger for myths, fairy tales, and folklore that hadn't been felt for centuries. But here's what makes this fascinating and deeply disturbing. The Victorians weren't just rediscovering these ancient stories, they were systematically destroying them. They took creatures that had terrorized communities for generations and transformed them into harmless playthings. Elves, once genuinely feared for their capacity for mischief and malice, were stripped of their power and repackaged as playful, benevolent figures dancing through children's books. This wasn't just happening to Christmas folklore. The Victorians were conducting a mass cultural lobotomy, turning every supernatural being they encountered into sanitized, romanticized shadows of their former selves. Fairies became small, childlike creatures with butterfly wings instead of the dangerous, unpredictable entities that once made grown adults avoid certain forests after dark. But why? What drove this systematic neutering of our most ancient fears? The answer lies in what Christmas was becoming. By the mid-19th century, industrialization had made elaborate celebrations accessible to the masses. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's German traditions, like decorating Christmas trees, were transforming a religious observance into something entirely different. something that required friendly, marketable characters instead of the terrifying spirits that had once kept people awake at night. In this shifting landscape, elves became the perfect symbols for Christmas. They carried just enough magic to feel otherworldly, yet remained approachable enough to represent the holiday's growing emphasis on joy and wonder. But there was something darker at work here, something that reveals an uncomfortable truth about how we romanticize labor. American illustrators sealed the elves' fate in the 1870s when Harper's Weekly published Thomas Nast's Christmas illustrations. Nast didn't just create the modern Santa Claus, he birthed the image of elves as Santa's loyal workforce, toiling away in their North Pole workshop. These weren't just whimsical drawings, they were cultural blueprints. Here's what's truly unsettling. Elves became associated with workshops and endless productivity right as the Industrial Revolution was grinding workers into dust. Think about it. While real people suffered in factories, working brutal hours for pennies, we created a fantasy of small, magical beings who worked tirelessly with smiles on their faces. The timing wasn't coincidental. These elves represented the perfect worker. They never complained, never demanded fair wages, never formed unions. They just worked endlessly and cheerfully, producing gifts for others while asking for nothing in return. By the century's end, we'd successfully transformed ancient spirits of chaos into symbols of joyful servitude. The elves weren't just integrated into Christmas folklore, they were domesticated, their wild nature stripped away and replaced with something far more convenient for a society built on exploitation. By the 20th century, something extraordinary had happened. The ancient, untamed spirits of the forest had been completely domesticated. These once feared beings, who could curse your bloodline or steal your children, were now making toys. The transformation was complete. Elves became Santa's devoted workforce, managing his workshop, crafting presents, and orchestrating the massive Christmas Eve operation. They were portrayed as cheerful, hard-working, and unquestionably loyal. Their mischievous nature, now it meant harmless pranks and playful antics, nothing more sinister than hiding a wrapping paper roll or leaving flower footprints in the workshop. But here's what's truly unsettling about this evolution. These creatures, who once commanded fear and respect across entire civilizations, had been reduced to employees. Dressed in festive red and green uniforms, they smiled endlessly while working around the clock in Santa's North Pole factory. Their wild, unpredictable magic channeled into assembly line productivity. Popular culture embraced this sanitized version with open arms. Movies, stories, and Christmas displays celebrated these delightful helpers, erasing centuries of folklore that warned against their darker nature. Children now dreamed of meeting Santa's elves, never knowing they were fantasizing about creatures their ancestors would have protected them from. At all costs, the ancient tricksters had become the ultimate symbols of Christmas magic, tamed, contained, and serving a corporate holiday machine. The evolution of elves, from malevolent spirits to benevolent guardians, mirrors our own relationship with the unknown. What once frightened us in the darkness of ancient forests now comforts us in the glow of movie screens. Perhaps this transformation reveals something profound about human nature, our ability to reshape fear into wonder, to find light even in the darkest mythologies. These immortal beings continue to captivate us because they represent what we've always yearned for: wisdom without the burden of mortality, power without corruption, beauty without decay. In reimagining them as allies rather than adversaries, we've created a bridge between our primal fears and our deepest hopes. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the hidden origins of these timeless beings. If you've made it this far and enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps spread the word about the channel, and subscribe to be part of our growing community of buried tales. What's your favorite portrayal of elves in film or literature? And knowing their darker origins, do you see them differently now? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear which version resonates with you more. Until we meet again, in the spaces between myth and reality, where the darkest tales are always buried.